I stood in the doorway of what used to be my bedroom, watching Mom hang up my custom curtains. The lavender fabric, a soft, dreamy linen I had saved for 3 months to buy, now framed windows that would never be mine again. It was a punch to the gut, a familiar ache that I recognized with chilling clarity. Sophia needs the bigger room for her art supplies, Mom said, her voice smooth and rehearsed. She didn't meet my eyes, just as I knew she wouldn't. It was the exact same excuse from my previous life, an echo reverberating across time, a death knell for the person I once was. My fingers trembled around my coffee mug, the chipped one, the one with a hairline crack near the handle. I'd chosen it deliberately this morning, a small, bitter sacrament to a moment I knew was coming. 26 years old, a functioning adult with a career and a life of my own, and I was being displaced, again. For my golden child sister, the perpetually aspiring artist who bled our family dry with her whims and her sensitivities. But this time was different. The tremors in my hands weren't from heartbreak or weakness. They were the thrum of a power I was only just beginning to understand. I wasn't the naive, tearful Emma who would swallow her pain and cram her life into the tiny guest room that smelled of mothballs and forgotten things. That Emma had died at 45, choking on regret in a lonely hospital room, her life a long, bleak landscape of sacrifices made for people who had given her nothing in return. I had woken up 3 days ago in my 26-year-old body, the ghost of my future, a cold fire in my veins. I had woken up with secrets. And this time, there would be no tears. Okay, Mom, I said. The words hung in the air, simple and devoid of the choking emotion she was expecting. She finally stopped fussing with the curtain tie back and turned, her brow furrowed in confusion. Her perfectly coiffed hair and the faint scent of her vanilla perfume, a scent I once associated with comfort but now recognized as the cloying fragrance of manipulation, seemed to fill the room. Okay, she repeated, testing the word. Just okay. Yes. She needs the room. I get it. I'll start packing my things. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm, just as I'd anticipated. I had let it sit on the counter while I mentally prepared for this conversation, this first crucial step in rewriting my own history. My calmness was a weapon she wasn't prepared for. In my first life, this moment had been a catalyst for a week of weeping, of me pleading with her to see the injustice. I had begged her to acknowledge that I, too, was her daughter, that my comfort mattered. My tears had been a satisfying drama for her, proof of her power to inflict pain and then offer a hollow, conditional comfort. My quiet acceptance now left a vacuum. It unsettled her deeply. I could see it in the way her gaze darted from me to the furniture, as if searching for a script she had misplaced. Well, that's very mature of you, Emma, she said, recovering slightly. It's just temporary, you know. Just until Sophia gets her grant and can afford her own studio space. A lie. In my first life, the temporary stay lasted 2 years. Sophia never got the grant. Instead, she got a new boyfriend who convinced her to move to Bali on a whim, leaving me to clean up the wreckage of her art studio. Paint-splattered walls, ruined carpets, and a pile of debt she'd accumulated in my name. The memory was so vivid it tasted like acid at the back of my throat. Of course, I said, my voice as smooth as polished stone. Family sacrifice. I used her own favorite phrase against her, and I saw a flicker of something, anger, fear, in her eyes before she masked it. She wanted a fight, a drama, a tearful scene to prove she was still in control. I was denying her all of it. I turned to leave the doorway, to retreat to the guest room that would be my temporary prison, a place where I would plot my liberation. I was done with this house, done with this family, done with being the sacrificial lamb on the altar of my sister's mediocrity. As I walked down the hall, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, my heart giving a single, hard thump against my ribs. It was a number I didn't recognize, but a message I was half expecting. A promise whispered to me in the twilight space between one life and the next. The message was short, the words stark against the white screen, a key turning in a lock I never knew existed. The penthouse keys are ready. Welcome home, Miss Chen. A slow, cold smile touched my lips. Mom thought she was moving me into the guest room. She had no idea I was moving out. Forever. The cast of villains in my life had always been a tight, intimate circle. They were the people who were supposed to love me, to protect me, to be my allies. In my first life, it took me decades to see the poison they dripped into my veins. This time, I saw them with perfect, chilling clarity. First, there was my mother, Linda Chen. She was a master of emotional manipulation, a weaver of guilt so fine and intricate you didn't know you were trapped until you tried to move. She had built her entire identity around being the mother of a gifted artist, and Sophia's every whim was a sacred command. My practical achievements, my degree, my steady job at a publishing house, my financial independence, were treated as mundane, almost distasteful footnotes. They were the sturdy, boring foundation that existed only to support the beautiful, fragile sculpture of Sophia's dreams. Then there was Sophia herself. 24 years old with the wide, innocent eyes and delicate features of a fairy tale princess. She had perfected the art of weaponized helplessness. A trembling lower lip, a whispered confession of being too overwhelmed to handle basic adult responsibilities. These were her tools of trade. She genuinely believed she was special, that the world owed her a life of ease and beauty. She wasn't consciously evil, she was just casually, devastatingly cruel in her self-absorption, swatting away my needs like they were inconvenient gnats. Within a day of my capitulation, Sophia had transformed my old room. The calming lavender walls I'd painted myself were now plastered with her dramatic, abstract canvases. The scent of vanilla and fresh paint was replaced by the acrid smell of turpentine and the heavy, musky perfume of her latest boyfriend, a lanky musician who seemed to take up permanent residence on my old bed. She treated the space like a personal hotel suite, leaving wet towels on the floor and half-empty wine glasses on the antique vanity that had belonged to our grandmother. I remembered this, all of this, the casual disrespect, the blatant disregard. In my past life, I had complained, and Mom had told me I was being jealous of Sophia's uninhibited creative spirit. This time I said nothing. I just watched and I made notes. My best friend, Maya Rodriguez, was next in the lineup. We'd been roommates in college, and she was the one person I thought I could trust. But Maya harbored a secret, festering resentment of my quiet successes. It was a poison she disguised as concern. We met for coffee 2 days after the room swap. "Are you sure you're okay with this, Em?" she asked, her brow knitted with practiced sympathy. "It just seems like your mom and Sophia are walking all over you, again." "I'm fine," I said, stirring my latte. "It's not worth the fight." "But that's the thing," she said, leaning forward, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "You're always so generous, so accommodating. You let them take and take. You need to set boundaries." It sounded like good advice. It sounded like a friend who cared. But I remembered where this conversation led. In my first life, her words had planted seeds of self-doubt. She had encouraged my resentment, fanned the flames of my frustration, and then reported every one of my private complaints back to my ex-fiancé, David, framing me as unstable and bitter. "You're probably right," I said, giving her a small, grateful smile. This time, I knew her game. And that brought me to David Kim, my ex-fiancé. He had re-entered my life just a few weeks ago, a ghost from a past I thought I'd buried. He claimed he'd made a mistake breaking up with me 2 years prior, that he was more mature now, that he wanted to try again. The truth, which I wouldn't learn until much later in my first life, was far more sinister. He had found out about a secret inheritance from my maternal grandfather, a fund I didn't even know existed, and he wanted his piece of it. He showed up at my office the next day, a bouquet of expensive lilies in his hand. "I heard about the room situation," he said, his voice dripping with synthetic charm. "Maya told me. I can't believe they're doing that to you." My blood ran cold. How detailed was Maya's report? "It's not a big deal, David." "It is a big deal," he insisted. "You deserve to be treated like a queen, Emma." He knew details he shouldn't. He knew I'd been working extra hours, that my apartment lease was up for renewal in a month, a detail I myself had forgotten until my second life began. He was gathering intelligence, probing for weaknesses. His reappearance wasn't a coincidence. It was a calculated campaign. Finally, there was my boss, Richard Thornton, the senior editor at the publishing house. A classic corporate predator, he oozed false mentorship, promising promotions while systematically stealing the best ideas from his junior staff. He had been dangling a senior editor position in front of me for 6 months. That afternoon, he called me into his office. "Emma," he said, beaming, "I have some great news about that historical fiction proposal you've been developing. The one about the female spies in the Renaissance." "Oh?" I kept my expression neutral, but my internal alarms were screaming. That proposal was my passion project, the best work I had ever done. "The board loves the concept," he said. "They think it has huge potential, but they feel it needs a more masculine perspective to really sell in the current market." I knew what was coming. I had lived this scene before. "So," he continued, steepling his fingers, "I've decided to assign it to James from the marketing department. He's got a great feel for what sells. You'll, of course, continue to support him with your research. In my first life, I had stormed out, my face burning with humiliation and rage. I had cried in the bathroom for an hour. This time, I simply nodded. "I understand, Richard, whatever is best for the project." His relief was palpable. He thought he'd gotten away with it. They all did. They saw the same old Emma, the compliant, emotional, easy-to-manipulate doormat. But that night, as I sat in the cramped guest room, the sounds of Sophia's party thumping through the walls, I wasn't crying. I was observing. I was documenting. And I was remembering. I remembered how these small, seemingly disconnected betrayals had woven together to form the suffocating tapestry of my first life. Sophia's art career was eventually funded entirely by my sacrifices, culminating in me taking out a second mortgage on a house I'd bought myself. Maya's lavish wedding was paid for with a loan from me that was never repaid. David's first business venture was launched with the very inheritance he was currently sniffing around for, and Richard, he eventually published my book under his own name. My physical reactions were under my complete control now. No more gut-wrenching sobs, no more pleading phone calls, just a cold, steady calm. I pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook and began to write, detailing every conversation, every lie, every subtle act of war they had declared on me. I remembered my forgotten apartment lease ending in 4 weeks. Perfect timing. I saw the signs of my mysterious benefactor everywhere now. A discreet black town car parked across the street from my office. New security cameras on my parents' street that I'd never noticed before. Someone was watching over me, providing me with resources I hadn't yet fully grasped. Before I went to sleep, I did one last thing. I logged into an old cloud account, a digital graveyard of my past life. And I found it. A backup of Sophia's old laptop. I navigated to her diary folder, a file I'd never had the heart to look at before. I opened an entry dated from this exact week in my previous timeline. The words glowed on the screen, a final, damning confirmation of everything I now knew to be true. "Mom gave me Emma's room today. It was so easy. Emma's so stupid. She'll give me anything if I just cry enough. It's almost too easy." I closed the laptop. The thumping from my old room continued, the sound of their casual, cruel celebrations. But I wasn't listening. I was planning. The game had just begun. The first loop of my silent revenge began, fittingly, in the room that was once mine. 2 weeks after taking it over, Sophia decided to throw a party. Not a small gathering, but a full-blown rager with a DJ and 100 of her closest art scene friends. I stayed locked in the guest room, the bass vibrating through my bones, and waited. The next morning, the aftermath was a war zone. I walked into my old room to retrieve a box of remaining keepsakes I hadn't yet moved to storage. The air was thick with the stench of stale beer and smoke. There were cigarette burns on the hardwood floor, a red wine stain blossoming across the lavender curtains, and, most devastatingly, my grandmother's antique silver-backed mirror, a cherished family heirloom, lay shattered on the floor, its frame splintered. I stood there feeling nothing but a cold, clean fury. Sophia was passed out on the bed, oblivious. I took out my phone and photographed everything: the mirror, the curtains, the burns, the empty bottles. Every piece of evidence. Later that day, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "Sophia told me about the mirror," she said, her tone already accusatory. Really, Emma, you should have moved all your things out. You know how careless Sophia can be when she's in a creative flurry. A creative flurry, that's what she called it. You're going to have to pay for the repairs, she continued, not a hint of apology in her voice. After all, you're the one who left your valuable things in there. It's your responsibility. I remembered this argument. In my first life, I had screamed, I had cried, I had pointed out the sheer, mind-bending injustice of it all. It had resulted in a week of silent treatment from her, and, eventually, me paying for a replacement mirror that wasn't half as beautiful. This time, I just nodded. You're right, Mom. I'm sorry. It was irresponsible of me to leave my belongings behind. I'll take care of the cost. She was visibly taken aback by my easy agreement. She had been gearing up for a fight. I turned away before she could process it, but my passive appearance was just a mask. My secret countermove was already in motion. First, I called Mr. Albright, an old friend of my grandmother's and a respected antique dealer. I sent him the photos of the shattered mirror. He called me back within the hour, his voice grim. Emma, that mirror was a signed Tiffany piece from the early 1900s. It was worth, at minimum, $15,000. This is a significant loss. He told me exactly how to file the insurance claim and offered to provide a formal, written appraisal. Next, I found another discrepancy. A collection of first edition vintage books, also my grandmother's, was missing from the box. I knew Sophia saw them as nothing more than dusty old objects. A quick search online confirmed my suspicions. I found them listed on a popular auction site, sold by a new user with the handle ArtGoddess24. The sales had totaled over $5,000. I took screenshots of everything and sent the information to the private investigator my benefactor had recommended. He was a quiet, efficient man named Marcus, who had already been compiling a file on my family's activities. He confirmed he would track the buyer accounts and the flow of money. I called Maya, knowing exactly what her reaction would be. $15,000 for a mirror? She scoffed over the phone. Emma, are you sure? That sounds crazy. Besides, it's just stuff. You're being a little petty, don't you think? Holding on to material possessions so tightly isn't healthy. Maybe you should talk to someone, for your attachment issues. Thank you, Maya, I said, my voice saccharine sweet. I really appreciate your honest feedback. You're such a good friend. I disconnected the call, my fingers already tapping out a text to Marcus, the PI. Please add a file on Maya Rodriguez, document her relationship with David Kim, and log all our communications. My final passive move was to quietly pack the last of my things from the house and move them into a secure, climate-controlled storage unit. A unit where, unbeknownst to anyone, I had Marcus install 2 tiny motion-activated cameras. I had a feeling my family might suddenly feel entitled to more of my abandoned possessions in the future. The public fallout was swift and beautiful. It began a week later. An official insurance investigator, a stern-looking woman in a severe suit, arrived at my parents' house. She had a copy of Mr. Albright's appraisal and a list of questions about the damaged and stolen property. Mom called me in a panic. Emma, what is this? There's a woman here asking about stolen books. You need to call her and fix this mess right now. You're embarrassing the family. I'm sorry, Mom, I said calmly. I had to report the loss for insurance purposes. It's just standard procedure. I could hear the sheer terror in her voice. The cold, hard reality of monetary value and legal consequences was something she couldn't manipulate away with guilt. The next day, Sophia discovered her ArtGoddess24 account, along with the attached bank account, had been frozen pending a fraud investigation. The $5,000 she'd made was now locked away, and she was being investigated for selling stolen goods. Her wailing phone call to me was immensely satisfying, but the sweetest part was the letter that arrived for Maya. It was from the insurance company's legal department, a formal notification that she might be called as a witness in a potential felony theft and property damage case. It gently reminded her that providing false testimony or attempting to dissuade a claimant was a serious offense. It also mentioned that all communications between myself and her had been logged and documented. Her terrified, stammering voicemail was music to my ears. She had no idea how I had documented our calls, but The mere suggestion was enough to make her realize she had stepped into a game far more serious than she'd imagined. The first loop was closing. My pieces were moving across the board, silent and unseen. And right on cue, the final player made his move. That evening, there was a knock on the door of the tiny temporary apartment I'd rented. It was David, his face a perfect mask of concern. "Emma, I heard what's happening," he said, stepping inside. "The insurance, the investigator. This is getting out of hand. Listen to me. I have connections. I can make all of this disappear. You just have to trust me again." He thought I was a damsel in distress. He thought he could be my knight in shining armor, solving the very problems his accomplice Maya had helped create. He had no idea I was the one holding the sword. "Trust you, David?" I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "We'll see." The war for my career was fought in the sterile, air-conditioned corridors of the publishing house. The second revenge loop began the moment Richard Thornton, my boss, presented my book proposal to the board as his own. I sat in the back of the conference room, a junior editor taking notes, and watched him perform. He used my words, my research, my passion, and painted it all with a veneer of his own self-important genius. He received a standing ovation, and the next day, the promotion to vice president of acquisitions that should have been mine. His first act as VP was to officially assign my project to James, the smirking sycophant from marketing. James, who wouldn't know a historical document if it was laminated and served to him on a silver platter. "Emma, I'll need you to train James on all your research methods," Richard told me, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Get him up to speed. We're on a tight deadline." "Of course, Richard," I said with a placid smile. "I'm happy to support the team." I was the picture of a loyal, if disappointed, employee. My passivity was their green light. Sophia, emboldened by my lack of reaction to her party, took her drama to a new level. She crashed a presentation I was giving to the sales team, waltzing into the conference room midway through, tears in her eyes. "Emma, I need you," she wailed. "Mom is putting so much pressure on me about the gallery. I need the family to support me." It was a calculated scene designed to make me look like the cold, unfeeling sister who put her boring job before her family's artistic emergencies. I politely escorted her from the building, apologizing profusely to my colleagues for the family emergency, my cheeks burning with a manufactured shame. Meanwhile, Maya was busy playing her own game. I knew from my PI, Marcus, that she was having weekly lunches with David. That evening, she called me, her voice laced with that familiar fake concern. "Em, I'm so worried about you. David told me you're having financial trouble. You just seem so stressed. Are you sure you don't need help? Someone successful like David could really rescue you." She was feeding him my fabricated struggles, painting a picture of me as a desperate woman in need of a savior. It was all part of their long con to get their hands on my non-existent financial woes and my very real, very secret inheritance. "Thanks for looking out for me, Maya," I said, my voice sweet as poison. "It's nice to know who my real friends are." My passive appearance was a smokescreen. Behind it, my secret countermoves were precise and devastating. First, the recordings. My mysterious benefactor had provided me with a pen that was also a high-fidelity audio recorder. Every meeting with Richard, every condescending instruction, every stolen idea, every discriminatory comment about needing a masculine perspective was captured in crystal-clear audio. I compiled this audio, along with time-stamped copies of my original proposal and research notes, into a secure digital folder. Then, I contacted a well-known publishing industry whistleblower network, an anonymous collective famous for exposing corporate malfeasance. I sent them the entire package. Next, the legal team. The benefactor had put me in touch with a powerhouse employment lawyer, a woman named Miss Sterling who specialized in intellectual property theft and workplace discrimination. She reviewed my evidence and smiled a shark smile. "Mr. Thornton is going to have a very bad year," she'd said. For James, my plan was simpler. During my training sessions, I didn't just give him my research, I buried him in it. I provided him with terabytes of raw data, uncollated source materials, and conflicting scholarly articles, all under the guise of being thorough. I knew he lacked the academic rigor to understand it, let alone synthesize it into a coherent presentation. I was giving him enough rope to hang himself and a stage on which to do it. The public fallout began with a single explosive article. The Whistleblower Network published their expose. It was titled The Ghost in the Machine: How a Major Publishing House Steals from Its Junior Staff. It didn't name me, but it featured anonymous testimony and transcribed audio clips that were unmistakably of Richard. The story went viral overnight. The company's stock plummeted. A federal investigation into their labor practices was announced within 48 hours. 2 days later, James gave his big presentation to the board on my former project. It was a spectacular failure. He stammered, he misquoted sources, he presented contradictory conclusions. It became painfully obvious to everyone in the room that he had never understood a single word of the research he was supposed to have mastered. He was humiliated, his career trajectory crashing and burning in real time. That same afternoon, my original book proposal, complete with its digital timestamps proving my authorship from 8 months prior, was leaked online. It was picked up by publishing blogs and literary agents, hailed as a brilliant, fresh concept. My email inbox exploded with inquiries from rival publishing houses. The cascade continued. Richard, facing a board inquiry and a federal investigation, called me, his voice a desperate rasp. "Emma, please tell me what you want. A promotion? A raise? The book is yours. We can say it was a misunderstanding. Just don't testify. I'll do anything." Simultaneously, Miss Sterling, my lawyer, was making her own moves. During the discovery process for my impending lawsuit, she subpoenaed phone records. She found the digital breadcrumbs linking Maya's phone to David's, showing the flow of information about my work life and fabricated financial state. Their conspiracy was no longer a secret. The climax of this loop arrived in the form of an official job offer from the largest, most prestigious publishing house in the country. They wanted me as a senior editor with my own imprint and a salary that was triple what I was making. They wanted to publish my book, the one Richard had tried to steal, and were offering a 7-figure advance. It was everything I had ever dreamed of in my first life. Vindication, success, respect. I was about to accept when a new text message arrived from my benefactor. "This is a victory, Miss Chen. But it is a small one. You have bigger opportunities waiting. Don't accept their offer. Resign from your current position tomorrow morning. The next phase is about to begin." I looked at the job offer, the key to a dream I once cherished. And I looked at the text message, the key to a destiny I was only just beginning to comprehend. The choice was easy. I was done playing their game. It was time to start my own. The final loop was the most painful, the one that severed the last rotted cords of family obligation. It began with my mother's grand delusion, Sophia's art gallery. Mom had decided that what Sophia needed to become a world-renowned artist was a chic downtown gallery space to showcase her genius. To fund this venture, she had taken out a second mortgage on the family home, a home she and my father had spent 30 years paying off. And she expected me to co-sign for additional loans to cover renovations and operating costs. "It's an investment in your sister's future, Emma," she'd said over a tense family dinner. "When she's famous, we'll all benefit. It's what families do for each other." I watched Sophia across the table, preening under the attention, already imagining herself as the next Frida Kahlo. She showed me the concepts for her debut show, a series of haunting, ethereal portraits. My blood ran ice cold. They were my concepts. From a portfolio I'd created in a college art class, a class I'd taken as an elective. I'd shown them to her once, years ago. And she had stolen them, line for line. The ultimate betrayals came in a 1-2 punch. A week later, Maya and David announced their engagement at a lavish party. They cornered me by the champagne fountain, beaming. "We just wanted to thank you, Emma," David said, squeezing Maya's hand. "Your personal information was so helpful in securing our pre-approval for the new condo. We couldn't have done it without you." They had used my identity, my good credit, my stolen personal data, to build a life together, identity theft, wrapped in a Tiffany engagement ring. When I refused to co-sign the loans for the gallery, all hell broke loose. My family, a united front of indignation, froze me out completely. The phone calls were brutal. My mother called me a selfish, ungrateful daughter. My father, a man who rarely spoke, mumbled that I was a disappointment. Sophia sent me a string of vitriolic texts, accusing me of being jealous of her talent and trying to sabotage her dreams. I was officially disowned for refusing to finance my own destruction. My passive appearance through all of this was a masterpiece of restraint. I politely declined to co-sign the loans, offering a simple, "I'm not in a financial position to do that right now," without further explanation. I wished them the best of luck with their gallery venture. I even attended Sophia's grand opening. I walked through the gallery, looking at my own stolen concepts hanging on the walls, bathed in expensive gallery lighting. When Sophia asked me what I thought, I smiled brightly. "The work is breathtaking, Sophia. You should be very proud." I didn't mention copyright law. I didn't mention the portfolio sitting in a fireproof safe, with original sketches dated 6 years prior. I sent a beautiful, expensive crystal vase to Maya and David for their engagement, with a card that read, "Wishing you a lifetime of happiness built on a foundation as solid as your integrity. Congratulations." I offered to help with their wedding planning. I accepted the family's rejection with quiet grace. I didn't return their angry calls. I didn't defend myself against their accusations. I simply disappeared from their lives, a ghost they thought they had vanquished. But in the shadows, my secret countermoves were aligning for the final, devastating checkmate. First, the art world. I sent an anonymous tip, along with copies of my original dated sketches, to three of the most influential art critics in the city. I also sent the package to a renowned art authentication firm. I knew they would relish the scandal of exposing a fraud. Second, the gallery. With the irrefutable evidence of intellectual property theft in hand, my lawyer, Miss Sterling, filed a massive copyright infringement lawsuit against Sophia and the gallery. We didn't just ask for damages, we filed an injunction to have the show shut down immediately. Third, the happy couple. I walked into the Central Police Precinct and filed a detailed report for credit fraud and identity theft. I provided Miss Sterling's findings, the phone records, the credit applications filled out with my information, the sworn affidavit from the loan officer at the bank. It was an open and shut case. Fourth, the family home. I had Marcus, my PI, investigate the mortgage application my mother had filed. As I suspected, she had wildly inflated their income and assets, a desperate act of fraud to secure the loan. I forwarded his findings to the fraud department of the mortgage company. The public fallout was not a single event. It was a cascade, a controlled demolition of the world they had built on my back. It began at the gallery. Two of the critics I'd tipped off attended the opening night. The next morning, their reviews were published. They didn't just critique the art, they destroyed it. They called it derivative, uninspired, and most damningly, they hinted at questions of authenticity and artistic integrity. The same day, the art authentication firm released a public statement confirming that the core concepts of the show were identical to earlier, dated works by another artist. Sophia's name was instantly toxic. The gallery was slapped with the injunction, its doors shuttered just 48 hours after opening. The real artists whose work Sophia had borrowed from began lining up with their own lawsuits. Next, the house. The mortgage company, armed with proof of fraud, immediately recalled the loan. With no way to pay it back, the house went into foreclosure proceedings. My parents, in their late 50s, were about to be homeless. Then came Maya and David. Two detectives showed up at Maya's office and arrested her for credit fraud. They picked David up at his apartment an hour later. Their smiling engagement photo was plastered all over the local news, alongside headlines about identity theft. Their engagement imploded under the weight of criminal charges, mutual blame, and the seizure of their illegally obtained assets. The family's reputation was annihilated. Their social circle, built on a carefully constructed image of success and affluence, abandoned them overnight. Friends stopped answering their calls, invitations were rescinded. They were pariahs. As a final, satisfying bookend, the federal investigation into Richard's former company concluded. The company was found guilty of systemic labor abuses and intellectual property theft. It was dismantled, its assets liquidated. Richard lost everything: his career, his reputation, his pension. He was a ruined man. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a silent, invisible puppeteer. I had taken everything from them: their careers, their home, their reputation, their future. I had given them back the same pain and destruction they had so carelessly inflicted on me. As I sat in the quiet, minimalist living room of my temporary apartment, watching a news report about Maya's tearful court appearance, my phone rang. It was the number of my benefactor. "It is done, Miss Chen," a calm, familiar voice said. "They have all fallen. Now it is time for you to rise. It is time to reveal who you really are. Your real inheritance awaits." The final loop was complete. A new life was about to begin. The truth, when it came, was larger and stranger than anything I could have imagined. My benefactor was a man named Mr. Gao, his face kind but his eyes sharp with an ancient intelligence. He had been my maternal grandfather's closest friend and business partner. He met me not in some shadowy office, but in the soaring, sunlit lobby of a skyscraper in the heart of the financial district. The Chen Tower. "Your grandfather was a visionary, Emma," Mr. Gao said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority. We sat in a plush leather armchair in a private lounge overlooking the city. "He built a technology empire from nothing. Chen Technologies. This building and everything in it is part of your inheritance." My head was spinning. An empire? My grandfather had been a humble watchmaker, or so my mother had always told me. "It was a necessary fiction," Mr. Gao explained. "Your grandfather feared that the knowledge of his wealth would corrupt his children, make them weak. He was correct in your mother's case. He saw the strength in you, even as a child, the resilience. He left everything in a trust for you, but with a condition." He paused, his gaze intense. "He wanted you to prove you were worthy of it, that you had the strength to wield this power, not be consumed by it. He set up this trust with me as the executor, to be unlocked only when you demonstrated that you could overcome the vipers in your own family." He slid a heavy portfolio across the polished mahogany table. It was filled with stock certificates, property deeds, corporate charters. My name was on every single one. Emma Chen, CEO. "The Penthouse isn't just a home," he said gently. "It's your headquarters. The company has been waiting for you. Growing, managed by me, but waiting for its true leader." The final piece of the puzzle was the most fantastical. "Your grandfather was a man of unconventional beliefs," Mr. Gao said carefully. "He made a contract a long time ago with an entity that deals in possibilities, in second chances. The contract stipulated that if his chosen heir, you, died before claiming her destiny, before reaching her full potential, time itself would be given a chance to reset. Your death at 45, bitter and alone, that triggered the clause. This isn't just a new life, Emma. It's the life you were always meant to have, a second chance to claim the destiny you were too weak to pursue before." The power balance of my world didn't just flip, it shattered. My reality reformed around me in an instant. Chen Technologies. The name was suddenly everywhere. News alerts pinged on my phone. The company I worked for, Richard's now collapsed House of Cards, was a minor subsidiary that Chen Technologies had acquired years ago as a small media asset. The real estate portfolio in the file was staggering. It included the downtown building where Sophia's failed gallery was located. It included the luxury condo tower where Maya and David had planned to live. And, in a final, exquisite twist of irony, I discovered that the mortgage on my parents' foreclosed home had been held through 3 shell companies by my own trust. I could have saved them at any time. I had owned their debt all along. The legal troubles that had befallen my tormentors, the investigators, the lawyers, the viral exposés, it was all orchestrated and funded by my own immense resources, expertly wielded by Mr. Gao on my behalf. I hadn't just reacted to their betrayals, I had commanded an army against them. The refusal scene was not one I had planned, but it was inevitable. They came to me at the Penthouse one by one, then in a desperate, pathetic group. Mom was first. She arrived looking haggard, her expensive clothes wrinkled, her face blotchy from crying. She fell to her knees on the marble floor of my foyer, the city lights twinkling like 1,000 mocking eyes through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind me. "Emma, please," she sobbed. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. I see it now. You are the strong one. You are the successful one. I'll disown Sophia. I'll make you my favorite. We can be a family again." Then came Sophia. She clutched a portfolio of what she called new, original artwork. She begged me to drop the lawsuits, to fund a new gallery, to give her another chance. I can be a real artist, Emma. I know I can. I just need your help. Maya and David arrived together, a united front of desperation. The engagement was clearly off, their faces etched with fear and mutual resentment. It was all a mistake, Emma, David pleaded. We only pretended to be engaged to make you jealous. We wanted you to see what you were missing. We can pay you back, Maya cried. Just call off the lawyers, please, Em. We were best friends. Finally, Richard Thornton, a broken man, was granted entry by my security. He offered to give me back every stolen idea, to publicly apologize, to nominate me for every industry award. He promised to dedicate his ruined life to rebuilding my reputation. They stood before me, a choir of the damned, offering me everything they had denied me, everything I had once cried and begged for: power, validation, family, love, credit. I set down the crystal glass of Pinot Grigio I was holding. The sound was a soft, definitive click against the marble tabletop. No. The word dropped into the vast, opulent silence, a single perfect stone into still water. But Emma, we're family, Mom started, her voice cracking. No? Richard stepped forward, his hands shaking. I can give you everything back. No. David reached for my hand, his touch like a spider's. We could try again. I pulled my hand away, my voice as steady and cold as the glass in front of me. No. I looked at each of their faces, seeing not villains anymore, but just ghosts. Pathetic, powerless ghosts from a life that was no longer mine. I had already taken everything from them. There was nothing left for me to want, and nothing left for them to give. I simply turned my back and walked toward the window, leaving them to be escorted out by the silent, imposing figures of my security team. The city spread out before me, a kingdom of light, and it was all mine. 6 months later, I stood on my penthouse balcony at sunrise. The city was awakening below, a symphony of soft light and distant traffic. The steam from my coffee mug mixed with the cool morning air. Across the skyline, a digital billboard scrolled through the day's financial news. The announcement of Chen Technologies' successful IPO was the top story. My company, my success, my life had found a new rhythm, one of peace and purpose. The first royalty check from my best-selling novel had arrived last week. The book Richard tried to steal was now an international phenomenon, translated into 14 languages. This morning, the front page of the city newspaper featured an article about the official launch of the Eleanor Chen Foundation, a charity I had established in my grandmother's name. It provided grants and scholarships for underestimated young women in the arts and sciences. The first recipients were announced today. My new assistant, a sharp, fiercely loyal woman named Anya, brought me my schedule for the day on a sleek tablet. A board meeting at 10, a book signing at the city's largest bookstore at 2, and an interview with Forbes at 4 about being one of the youngest self-made female CEOs in the tech industry. Self-made. The irony was not lost on me. Between the meetings, I had a yoga session scheduled on the rooftop garden I had designed, a green oasis overlooking the mountains beyond the city. After work, I was attending a gallery opening, not to gloat, but to buy a piece from a brilliant emerging artist my foundation was sponsoring. Dinner was with a group of new friends, authors, entrepreneurs, scientists, women who had earned their place at the table through merit, not manipulation. Glimpses of my old life still surfaced, like debris washing ashore after a storm. I'd seen a small article mentioning that Richard Thornton was now working as a freelance editor, struggling to rebuild his shattered reputation. Sophia's social media, which I checked once out of a detached curiosity, showed her working a retail job at a mall boutique. Her art career was a footnote, permanently tainted by the plagiarism scandal. Maya and David's legal troubles were ongoing, a slow grind through the justice system. Their relationship had predictably crumbled under the weight of their shared guilt and financial ruin. And my mother. I saw an online listing for a small one-bedroom apartment she had rented in a different city, 2 states away. She was starting over, her social connections severed, her comfortable life erased. I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just a vast, quiet emptiness where the pain used to be. The final scene of my old life played out not in the city, but by the sea. I was at my coastal vacation home, a minimalist glass house perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. I walked along the private beach as the sun began to set, the sand warm between my toes. The ocean breeze was a clean, salt-tinged caress. Tomorrow, I was flying to New Zealand for the first leg of my international book tour. After that, I was planning to backpack through Southeast Asia for 3 months to research my next novel. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my linen pants. I pulled it out. It was a text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was from. "I'm sorry, can we talk?" It was signed simply Sophia. I looked at the message for a long moment, the words small and desperate against the glowing screen. Then, without hesitation, I deleted it. I didn't block the number, I didn't reply, I just erased it. The sunset was breathtaking, a riot of gold and crimson painting the horizon. The waves crashed against the shore, a steady, rhythmic pulse, erasing my footprints from the sand, as if the past had never existed. I had everything now, the success, the freedom, the peace. But more importantly, I had something my previous life had never offered me, something more valuable than all the money and power in the world. The unshakable knowledge that I deserved it all. The ocean whispered its endless, ancient song, and for the first time in 2 lives, I smiled, and I was finally truly home.